What's up, guys? I hope you're doing well out there. And today on the podcast, we have Jacob Duran. Now, you have absolutely no idea who Jacob Duran probably is, but he's Stitch, right? On the podcast, we even talked about that, the fact that like we go by first like one name monikers. It's like the name. This is not even like a thing. I just thought about it. They're one of the early UFCs. You know, they used to have the guy fight Chemo.
Yes.
And one of the fun, it was like they had so many slip ups back then during the old days, and the Chemo comes out and they're like, it's the man with one name, Chemo Leopoldo. You're like, really? You just gave him two, right? But no, like, Stitch, like he goes by Stitch and I go by Chewy, but he is the cutman, right? Like when you think of cutman, he's like one of the dudes, if not the dude that pops up into your mind. I mean, for me, like if I think cutman, that's who I think of, Stitch. Right? I mean, the dude had tape. Like he had Stitch tape. It was like his own brand of tape that you're wrapping people's hands with, and super fascinating, dude. I really enjoyed this podcast. Such a cool human being to talk to. Such a cool story. And he's got a lot of stories, because he's been there with the highest level MMA fighters. He's been with the highest level boxers. He's been able to be in the back room with them before they go out to battle and see the emotions and stuff. So he's got a lot of cool stories this year. So I hope you guys enjoy that. Real quick, big thanks to all of our sponsors. First one is Charlotte's Web. Charlotte's Web is the CBD that Eugene and I personally use. We brought them on to be on a podcast sponsor because it's a good product. Right now, some of the cool stuff they just came out with. They just came out with a balm. It's in like a nice little convenient little like squirt can. But I've been using that thing. I really like it. It's been helpful with my shoulder because I've got like some sort of like, I think it's probably labrum a little bit, maybe a little impingement or something, but it's getting better. I did a little bit of pressing the other day. Didn't hurt. Yeah, so it's getting better with some exercises that Eugene gave me, and I've been putting that balm on there like after showers especially. It seems for me like when I use it after the shower, it's when it's really good. And honestly, just it was cool. I got a message the other day. I'll have to get his name and talk about it on the next podcast, but I got a message from a guy who recently got some of the gummies, and he got the melatonin gummies,
sleep gummies.
Yeah, and he was like, dude, he goes, I felt great. Like I conked right out, felt great, slept wonderfully. So again, if you want to check out some of their stuff, guys, go to charlottesweb.com and use the promo code Jiu Jitsu for any of the CBD stuff that they have there. And again, whatever CBD product you decide to use, that's on you. This is the one I like, and again, I like it because it's third-party tested. I know what I'm putting into my body, and whether it's the supplements I take or the food that I eat, I want to know what I'm putting into my body because I want to make sure I'm taking care of it in the proper way, right? Because again, health is everything. So if you're taken care of, it's going to be good. So anyway, that's that. Our next sponsor is Roll Bjj. They make cool t-shirts and rash guards and all kinds of jiu-jitsu gear. Most commonly, I feel like the thing that ends up getting popped up on the most is their t-shirts. Granted, I have some gis that are good gis that I want to start wearing once we kind of get back to the swing of things with training after this whole quarantine mess. But like any time I wear the shirts in the videos, people want to know what they are. It's like, oh, where's that shirt? I got to check it out. So if you guys have watched any of my recent jiu-jitsu videos on YouTube, you may have seen me wear them, like the triangle chokes shirt or the the sushi shirt or whatever. But again, you can check out their stuff at epicrollbjj.com, and you can use a promo code Chewjitsu. Again, it's 15% off.
Yes, and he did just come out with this conspiracy theory shirt that I think that was in conjunction with Tom DeBlas. It's got the Sasquatch with the face mask and like the aliens and flying saucers. It's kind of interesting.
It's like the 2020 shirt. So like, go take a look at it. It's a funny shirt. Even if you don't decide to buy it, I would just encourage you to take a look at it. Like I got a good laugh out of it because it's a pretty cool shirt.
Well, and proceeds during, I believe, all the month of June will go to a school or somebody that's in need, like maybe a school that's been affected by the coronavirus stuff.
Coronavirus or the riots. I mean, gosh, the 10th planet and out in California.
Yeah. So the proceeds of that shirt will go to supporting someone in need in the jiu-jitsu community or martial arts community.
Cool. And then the last one that we have today, guys, is Jugo. Jiugo. It is a card game with jiu-jitsu. So basically, it's like jiu-jitsu in your pocket. You pull it out, and you have these cards. And again, when I have them, the thing that I think is, I know I talk. If you guys actually listen to me when I'm talking about this stuff, I love the artwork on them. They're so cool. But right now, we've got the kind of like what he calls the core deck, which is basically. It's literally like the fundamental basic jiu-jitsu. So if you wanted to know, like, I get questions like, what's fundamental jiu-jitsu? I'm like, just pick up these card games and you can just pick this, right? It's like close guard, friggin' arm bars, What do we got here? Single leg takedowns, all this stuff. But anyway, it's a card game, and I'm excited because I think whenever my kids get back into the gym, I'm gonna try to use it with them because I think it would be kind of a cool idea to have them like use it and kind of be familiar with it, just to kind of have something fun to do that's related to jiu-jitsu and familiarize yourself with the names and the positions. Because I know that when my girlfriend and I played it, she's a white belt, and she was kind of having to think a little bit like, okay, this one goes with this one goes with this, and kind of having to think a little bit about how the cards go. But again, it was a fun card game, and going to test it out there and see how the kids like it.
Yeah. And he's coming out with some expansion packs soon. Nothing out yet, but he's going to have the blue deck, which is going to be like basically as you progress, in your jiu-jitsu journey, you're going to have new techniques. So he's going to have some new cards that are going to be incorporated to show some new techniques. It's kind of interesting, man. Just the creativity behind this game blows me away because I'm not a terribly creative person in that sense or artistic. But James that created Jugo is like a super creative guy.
Yeah, and what's the website again?
JugoPlay.com, JIUGOPLAY.com, and then Chewjitsu is the code, 10% off of your purchase.
Cool. And then, guys, we have something kind of special going on with Eugene. Eugene is coming out with a course for hip. So you guys know Eugene's a physical therapist. Eugene's the guy that basically fixes our gym. So when we get broken, we go to Eugene, and Eugene fixes us, right? Like my shoulder's been jacked up, and he's got me doing all these little band exercises and stuff, and it's getting better, which is nice. But again, he's our guy that fixes us. And so he's coming out with a hip course because hips and jiu-jitsu are one of the areas that just take a beating because we constantly get in hip flexion, and we get these weird muscular imbalances, and then our hips are getting compressed and all this stuff. So there's all these things going on where I'm sure if you guys have trained jiu-jitsu long enough, you've probably had some weird pain in your hips at times. I know I have. And again, he's got some really cool exercises and movements and stretches and things like that you can do in it. And he's going to be coming out with a course, and the way that it's going to work is that he's going to do, I think it's like we're doing it for 2 weeks or something?
Yeah, we'll do like a couple weeks.
Okay. So for 2 weeks, he is going to release it because, again, this is one of his first big products. So he wants to test it with people. So he's going to do it for the first 2 weeks. He's going to allow people to join and, get the product at a cheaper price because you guys are going to be like, I don't want to say guinea pigs. But kind of, right? You're going to be like the test group, and then what's going to happen is he's going to be able to maybe kind of take filled questions a little bit more directly. So once you get the hip course, you can start using it, and then if you have questions about it or have questions about some other body parts and stuff like that, you can funnel those through to Eugene, and he can maybe give you some help with a particular area that you're struggling with. And so again, if you want to be on sort of that early launch, that early access, and to have a bit of connection to Eugene. To maybe quiz them with some of your issues, because we all got them. If you've been training jiu-jitsu or if you're like above the age of 30, you probably got some physical issues. Go to the website. He set up a page. Or what's the page?
It's grapplingrx.com, and it's /hips.
HIPS.
Yes.
So if you go there, you'll have like a little email page. You put in your email address and stuff, and then he'll contact you later on with information about how to sign up for the course, and then also you can get information on again, you could talk to him to maybe get some stuff to fix you up and fix those imbalances that you might have. But again, check it out. It's some cool stuff, and again, he's put a lot of work into it. He's been during this whole quarantine, he's been going over there. He refilmed the videos and everything else, so it's going to be good, and I think it'll help a lot of people out because. Again, it's just one of those things where if you fix the way that your body moves, if you improve movement, your jiu-jitsu gets better because jiu-jitsu itself is movement. That's it, right? So if you move better, your jiu-jitsu is better, period, point blank. So I would encourage you guys to check it out, and especially if you're dealing with some tightness in your hips and your basically your legs and everything else. It's a key area. So anyway, I'm done talking about that stuff. So with that said, let's get started with the podcast.
How long have you been in the fight game?
It's about 35 years, bro.
35.
How did you get started with with fighting, training, martial arts, kickboxing? How did you get started with everything just in general?
A great story, man, because I grew up as a farm worker. You guys are from Kentucky, right?
Mm-hmm.
I grew up in the Central Valley of California, which is the agricultural capital of the world. So, I mean, they got everything: tomatoes, peaches, cotton, apricots, grapes. I mean, I tell people, if you ate it, I picked it. I picked it for you. But that's what I used to do. I grew up as a farm worker, and baseball was always my game. All Mexicans play baseball, you know that. So I always wanted to be a pro ball player. And when I got out of high school, I went to a small school, I walked down to Merced College to play baseball, and the college was 9 miles away from my town, and I didn't have a car, so I would go to school with my friends, and after school they would go home, and I'd stay and I'd practice with the team, and I'd have to kind of hitchhike all the way home 9 miles to my hometown, and I was naive, that's growing up as a farm worker. I just didn't know anything, but I didn't know about grants or scholarships or talking to the coach, and so I just joined the Air Force. Now, I went to the recruiter in 1972. I walked into the recruiter and joined the Air Force. And 2 years later, 1974, they stationed me in a place called Thailand. I didn't know what Thailand was, right? But I always told myself that if I went to the Orient, I always wanted to study the martial arts, right? But like I say, I was a young kid. I didn't know what Thailand was. And that was kind of towards the end of the Vietnam War. I was at the base that had the B-52s where they would load them, go to Nam, drop them, come back and load them again. But I saw my first Muay Thai fight. I had friends that were there like 3 months before me. And, I saw my first Muay Thai fight, and the guy threw a kick and knocked the guy out, and people going crazy. I said, shit, I'm in. So on base, the only thing they had was Taekwondo. I mean, Taekwondo, Thailand, to me, it's, what do I know, right? I started taking Taekwondo at the base gym with all the GIs, and it just happened that like 3 months later, the Koreans left and the Thais took over, and they started transitioning us into the Muay Thai system and all that. So that whole year I ate, slept, and dreamt martial arts. And when I got back to the States, I lived in Oakland, and I got into boxing to improve my hands because my legs and elbows and knees were pretty good. And, just such a new sport. And especially Muay Thai was really non-existent. I was one of the first Falungs that actually, came and trained. And so anyway, I opened up my own school of kickboxing. When I moved up to the suburbs, it was ASK, the American School of Kickboxing. And if you remember the guy from Kickboxer, Dennis Alexio.
Yeah.
Well, he was one of the guys I worked with, great athlete, best athlete I ever met until MMA guys came. And, made the move. I had my own school of kickboxing in Fairfield, California, and promoted fights, trained fighters, managed them. Plus, I had a job, right? But I wanted to follow my dreams, be with the big boys. So I made the move to Vegas like 26 years ago. And here I am. Shit kicked in, and I rolled the dice, and things worked out pretty good for me. So I've been blessed.
Now, how did you go from training the fighting and all that kind of stuff to getting into rapping? Because obviously, anybody that has watched mixed martial arts for long enough, and boxing, everything else, if they've watched fighting for long enough, the fight game, they know who you are. Everybody knows who you are, right? So like with that, how did you get started with that particular facet? Because you become this kind of specialist in that niche, at least to all of us that watch you. That's how we know you. So you become this specialist, and it's such a thing that people probably they don't really necessarily think about, but it's still a really important facet, because if people are out there punching and things like that, they've got to have a good wrap on their hands. I know that for me, when I fought, MMA and stuff like that, I remember having a good hand wrap versus a bad one, and a bad one would get in your way to grab with the gloves on, and you couldn't really punch because you were nervous. And then having a good one, man, it's like you feel like you've got this really strong thing that you can punch with, and it's secure and everything else. So how did you get into that?
Well, it's funny because Forrest Griffin, a famous line from him is when I wrapped his hands, he says, it felt so good I could punch my mother. But you're right. That first stage of getting your hands wrapped is the most important thing. First step of you going into battle. But how did I get into that? Well, like I said, when I got into the boxing, I started training in boxing just to improve my skills, not to be a fighter, because I had a corporate job. I had an 8 to 5 job, and really the only thing that was out there at this point was point karate, and then so fighting was never really in my DNA. Just I didn't know about it, Plus I had an 8 to 5 job, company car, and all that shit. So I got into boxing, and then I decided to open up my own school of kickboxing with a credit card. So I was training fighters, and not only was I training them, but we were going all over the world. I had some real good fighters. Javier Mendez, one of the guys that I worked with before. But that's how I learned to wrap hands. But I practiced on myself, and I practiced on you, Chewy. I practiced on you, Eugene. I always practice because everybody has different hands, different injuries, different skills, you know. So that's how I learned, and that's been my trademark. You know, I know when Fedor Emelianenko, first time I wrapped his hands, was in Pride in Japan when he had just come back from breaking his thumb, and it was his first fight back, and the promoter asked me if I'd wrap his hands. And, man, I was so honored. So I wrapped Fedor's hands, and, you know, I've worked with many Russians before, so so I know their personality is a little bit more stoic, a little bit more quiet. I'm trying to talk to Fedor, and he ain't saying shit to me. So finally, wrapping his hands, and I said, well, how do they feel? He goes, super. Bro, that's all he said, man. I walked out. I was the happiest guy in the world. And after the fights, he invited me and Josh Barnett into the dressing room. He had won to shot the vodka with Fedor. So, you know, great
man.
Every time he fought after that, him and his brother, Alexander, I always wrapped their hands. So it's become one of my trademarks for giving you guys that confidence. And you were talking about some being loose and you couldn't grab and all that. But, you know, everybody, you got to design it according to the person. So that's why I asked you if you want a knockout wrap or a tap out wrap, because if you're going to be cracking, I'm going to be locking it up a little bit more. If your major technique is grappling, well, I'm going to give you that flexibility, but I'm still going to be able to lock it in. And Frank Mir, a great quote. Frank says, when I see Stitch walking into the dressing room, my stomach just drops because I know it's time to fight. And you know that feeling.
Yeah. What would you say, you know, difference wise, like, so you're kind of, is it more the tightness or the type of wrap that you're going to do between like MMA and boxing? I mean, obviously you have the gloves to work with. Like, how are you going to, you know, just for anyone just out there, just learning to wrap hands, what are some of your kind of key tips on those different aspects?
Yeah, I actually, good question. And, but I do the wrap that I do for boxing. I do for MMA because if it works for boxing, it works for MMA, right? Except we just don't put as much padding on the MMA. But there are some adjustments because, like Chewy's saying, you know, let's say he's more of a grappler, he might want it a little bit more looser on the wrist because I'll lock in the wrist. So when you punch, it won't jack up, but I'll loosen it up a little bit and I'll give you that flexibility. So every fighter is different when it comes to their selection of how they want their hand wrapped. And, you know, like the Brazilians, some don't like the thumb. You know, and at first I started doing it, but then I started educating them. I said, look, man, the reason you have it around the thumb because it anchors everything in. And once you close your hand, then all this tightens up. So because they were all grapplers and they did it without wraps, they never really knew the difference until I started wrapping their hands that way and I converted them. So.
Yeah. Gotcha.
Yeah, we were talking about Frank Mir, that kind of like it rang true to me because, like, you know, I remember whenever you would have your hands wrapped, because, you know, there's that weird sort of like that time period before the fight, you know, and then as soon as, like, you know, you go to the fighters meeting and then all of a sudden your coach is coming around, or, you know, the guy wrapping your hands, you know, is coming around and you're getting that done. As soon as you have those hand wraps on, you know, and they come, the commission checks them off, you're like, okay, it's like it's getting ready to be time, and that's absolutely right.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, I've always felt like I'm the guy in the old dungeon in the old gladiator days. Where I walk into the dungeon and I put the armor on, right? I'm that guy. Then you go out to the arena and you go out there life and death, you know. It's just that modern day version is me wrapping your hands.
That's cool.
Yeah. Is there, you know, it's just funny to me, just you've been in all these different environments. Is there anything that kind of like maybe even working at MMA event for the first time, you know, talking about that, what was that like for you, just coming from the boxing and kickboxing background, did you even know what to expect the first time you wrapped hands for an MMA fight?
I knew this much about MMA, bro, you know, and what happened is, I knew Dana for years, way before the UFC, right? We were always in the gyms and you know, I was training fighter. I was working with boxers, professional fighters. Dana was doing pads for the housewives and the executives and all that. But I knew Dana through that. He brought me in. I had to throw that shit in.
Wasn't he like a jazzer? Like, it was like a boxer size instructor or something?
Yeah, he never worked an A-level fight. You know, I don't think he ever worked a B-level fight. And I might have to check my records and see if he even worked the C-level fight. Right? But nonetheless, he's the one that brought me in.
Okay.
And then that, it just kind of, changed my whole program. But I learned, well, the first two guys that I rapped, and we were talking about it just the other day, is Jens Pulver and Dave Monet. And at that time, it was the Pat Miletich camp. Well, I knew nothing about wrestling, nothing about MMA. I didn't even know who Pat Miletich was. I didn't know who Jens Pulver, but I wrapped their hands like I did boxers. And that seemed to have sufficed. But Leon Tabs was the original cut man from UFC 1, and he was working with us. And he's the one that told me that you can't put that much padding because the gloves won't fit. But right off the bat, they started liking it, and never stopped. But yeah, Jens Pulver, Dave Monet, my first two guys.
What was your first MMA event? Like, do you remember which one that was?
It was UFC. Let's see, they bought the UFC, and first show was 32. I think it was in New Jersey. I came in on 33 when they did shows at the MGM here in Las Vegas. So and then Burt Watson. At that time, it was only Burt Watson and Leon Tabs, and Leon Tabs is the original cut man that they brought over from UFC 1. But at that time, they only had one cut man. Dana decided, which got to give him props. He decided, let's have a cut man in each corner, and that's why he called me, and that's changed my life. So that I give him props for.
Yeah, it's strange that they wouldn't have had two cutmen because if both guys get cut open, like how do you draw straws and see who gets to get the work?
Leon Tabb says Frank Shamrock was pissed at him because I think he fought. I can't remember who Frank fought, Tito or something. Anyway, he went and worked on that fighter and didn't have a chance to work on Frank, and that pissed him off. But that was a situation that Leon said, shit. I was put in a hard position there. I went and took care of one. They were both cut. And, in MMA now, both guys getting cut are quite common. So you got to have one on each side.
So we talked a little bit about the hand wrapping. So let's talk about the actual cuts. I mean, how did you learn, how to deal with cuts? Did you educate yourself? The equipment that you use. Did you have things that you prefer? Tell me a little bit about that, because some people, aren't really. They're more squeamish, so maybe not like to see that kind of, because there's some gnarly cuts out there. I think there's one, a boxing match. I think you were talking about one time. I forgot the guy's name. He had a really bad cut across the vein, I think here. Yes. Yeah. So how did you get into the whole, how did you learn, about stopping cuts, dealing with cuts?
It was funny because when I had my school of kickboxing, I was still involved in boxing, right? But I went to Richmond, California. Bone Crusher Smith fought Marvis Frazier in boxing. And I went there as a fan and still learning, trying to be a cut man. I was working still at the amateur level. And this guy did a good job on cuts. And I went over there after the fights and I say, hey, man, you did a nice job. I'm trying to learn to be a cut man. Can you tell me what you did? And he says, fuck you. He says, I'm taking this to my grave and you got to learn like me. And he walked away. I felt about big, man. And but it just emphasized that I was never going to be like him. But that was, I learned on my own, watching other guys. There's no schools, there's no nobody. These guys thought it was a secret. So I basically learned in the trenches, But I read up some books on some veins, on bleeding, and what's the best way to to coagulate it, and what products to use, and the commissions in the United States, for the most part, the adrenaline chloride 1/1000. That's what you use in the swab. That closes up the blood vessels, so that's a vessel constrictor. And the other two, which are thrombin and avatine, are coagulants. And very seldomly do we even use those. But those are the only things authorized. And then Quick Aid, which is 100% natural. It's a seaweed base. And you just put it on the cut, and it dehydrates the blood, and it stops it from bleeding. So, but now I know the game, in Eugene. Now that I know the game, I go back on what this guy said. And there's no secret to what we do. It's all based on technique. And, you're talking about some guys get squeamish. I get doctors, nurses, EMTs, paramedics, housewives, guys. Everybody sees what I do as a cut man. Everybody wants to be a cut man. And they ask me what they have to do. So here's what I tell them. And Chewy, if you're going to be a fighter, you got to spend hours and days and weeks and months and years in the gym, working with the fighters, donating your time, wrapping their hands, getting their confidence, working the corner, building yourself up to slowly working on cuts. Because now I do seminars. Now I've put videos out only because of what this guy had told me, you know, that I said I'd never be like him. And it's funny because I go back to Open with Andre Ward, which was the middleweight champion of the world.
Yeah.
They retired undefeated. I went back home to work some fights, and now him and his son want to take pictures with me, you know? So I have victory within myself, you know, and I've told that story probably 100 times, but I've never thrown his name out because, you know, that wasn't important, but that motivation that he gave me was. So, yeah, could have threw his name out, but I didn't.
Yeah. It's interesting how that happens sometimes. I feel like, you know, certain people respond differently to different stimuluses, but, you know, the negative sometimes, like someone telling you to basically kick rocks when you're asking them for a little bit of a hand up, sometimes can, you know, like you said, can motivate you, be like, I'm going to be really good at this, and I'm going to not be like you know, because you think about, like, with fighting growing, I mean, there has to be someone like you, like a, you know, kind of like in older times, like a tribe would have the elder who would then show the other warriors how to be those things. And like you said, you got to be that guy so that you can show other people. And when it boils down to it, there's technique. And then, like you said, there's repetition. You got to be in there rapping, doing all the work, getting the technique down.
Yeah, 100%. No different than what you do as a fighter. You know, the same steps that you do to perfect what you do, whatever technique, it's all on seconds, it's all on positioning, it's all on timing. It's the same stuff, man. And as long as you understand each cut, where it's at, and what kind of cut it is, and whether the fighter's taking ibuprofen or aspirin, you know, thins out the blood, those are all the things that you have to work on. But I agree. And you're talking about, let me throw another story out regarding this guy. There was a guy years ago, when I lived in the Bay Area, he was always there in the gyms all the time, but never really being one of the guys that did things. You know how they are. Anyway, I went to go see a workout. Riddick Bowe was fighting Evander Holyfield at Caesar's Palace, and I had just moved to Las Vegas, and I ran into Eric at the workouts, and he's sitting next to me and my wife, and we're talking, and as he leaves, he puts his hand on my leg, and he says, "Whatever you do, I'm going to do better," right? And he left, and I was looking, I said, "Damn, what was this?" You know? Wow. So anyway, last week I did an interview, and he was one of the co-hosts, but he's still the same Eric, has really done nothing and really shouldn't have been a co-host. But at that time, I could have busted his balls and said, you know what, let me tell you a story about Eric. You know, here's what he told me. But I said, you know what, that's not important, you know. But I will, another story that motivated me is Randall Cunningham. He's the quarterback for the Philadelphia Eagles. Yeah. I did a show here in Las Vegas when I still lived in the Bay Area. Dennis Alexio fought. And me and my three brothers were talking to Randall Cunningham, and we were nobody. I was still Jacob. I wasn't even Stitch at that time. And one Don King's guys comes and says, "Hey, Randall, I need to talk to you." And he says, "You know what? Hold on. Let me finish talking to these guys." Man, I never felt so good in my life, man. I felt important. And he's a pastor here in Las Vegas, and I've never met him, but when I do meet him, I'm going to let him know that, you know what, this is how I treat the fans, because this is the way you treated me, you know, is those little guys are the most important people that have your back. Try to throw those stories out, man.
Yeah. No, they're good stories, man. And have you had a moment, you know, because obviously you do seminars and you teach other people the craft that you've developed, right, and that you've perfected. Have you ever, like, gotten someone come back to you from your seminars and be like, dude, like that thing you showed, I was treating this guy's cut, or I was wrapping this guy's hand, or, you know, kind of like I guess you'd say a testimonial feedback from someone saying, dude, this was awesome. It helped out so much. Thank you. That kind of thing.
Oh, of course. It's nice, you know, to get those kind of compliments. And, you know, the first video I put out was giving the fighter one more round, showing how to wrap hands and the basic techniques on working cuts, right? So at least, you know, because my thinking, Chewy and Eugene, is a trainer would show a fighter how to fight, but nobody shows a trainer how to take care of the fighter. And that's my job, right? And but yeah, I've gotten guys where I walk into a dressing room at fights, and the guy's wrapping hands. He goes, "Hey man, I learned how to wrap hands watching your videos. Thanks, you know. Hey man, I worked on this cut. I did what you did," and you know, and that's a good feeling, man, when they come up and they mention that.
That's the best.
Yeah.
I've even had guys on Twitter and Facebook that they have somehow an injury or one of their kids got injured, and they show me, here's what Stitch did, here's what I did. So
Yeah.
yeah, so people have paid attention.
You're kind of honestly like, I mean, you're really the most well-known cutman in the world. I would say you're kind of the face of cutman, and you know, getting that name. How did you get the name Stitch? Who gave you that nickname? Obviously, it makes sense. But you know, how did you get that nickname?
Yeah, that's a good question. I'll give you a good answer to that. So when I had my school of kickboxing, Dennis Alexia was fighting. He was defending his world title, and one of his sparring partners was Dave Rooney, and Dave had one of the earlier fights, the undercard fights. And I'm learning to be a cutman. I'm still as green as could be. I'm doing it through observation and trying to do it. Well, Dave Rooney got a cut, and knowing the cuts that I know now, wasn't a big cut, but nonetheless it was still a cut. So I would see these other cutmen, because then it was only boxing. All right. So then I would see these old cutmen, and they would get the tape and they would cut little pieces of tape, steel strips, and make butterflies. So that's what I did with Dave Rooney. And Dave Rooney says, man, you save me some stitches. I'm going to call you Stitch, you know. And that's where the name stuck. And, you know, Dave Rooney, last I heard, he's a fisherman somewhere in Alaska. And I haven't seen him since those days. And I don't even know if he knows how he changed my life. People don't even know my real name. You know? It's funny, you know.
That's kind of, I attribute that to Chewy as well. You know, nobody calls him Nick. You know, everybody knows him as Chewy. And for you, nobody knows your name is Jacob. You know, everybody calls you Stitch. So it's just kind of funny. You know, I'm sure your friends or your family call you, you know, by your first name, but I don't know. But we don't even call you because we're, you know,
the only people that call me by my actual my government name is like is family, right? That's it. Like close family that know me since I was a boy. But even my best friends, like they all call me by my nickname. You know, is that the same for you?
Yeah, pretty much. And you know, and it's funny because when I hear Jacob behind me, I'll turn, because usually the ones that call me Jacob are ones that I knew from before I was Stitch, right? So that kind of catches my attention also. But yeah, hey, nothing wrong with having a one name like Chewy and Stitch, man. You know? So that's not a bad.
That sounds like some kids movie or something.
Chewy and Stitch. Yeah, that's not a bad one.
Yeah, well, you know, when Leon and I were working together, it was Leon and Stitch instead of Leo. Originals. You know?
Yeah, you know how I was actually, and this was not even on purpose. I was actually watching TV, and I was watching Creed 2, the movie Creed 2, and I saw you in the background, like, you know, because you're one of the cutmen. And I was like, what was that like for you to be just on set with some of these actors, or getting even called up to be this? You know, obviously you're playing the role of the cutman, but what was that like for you?
Man, I've been in 6 movies. Actually, I've been in 7 movies, and I'm not even an actor, and I've never asked for one job, but they just called me, you know. And the first one that I did was with Woody Harrelson and Antonio Banderas. It was a boxing movie called Play It to the Bone. And the second one I did was Ocean's 11, when Vladimir Klitschko, when they robbed the casino, they had the big show. Vladimir Klitschko was actually fighting Lennox Lewis, and that's when the lights go out. And subsequently, I started working with Vladimir Klitschko after that movie for 12 years. He became the heavyweight champion of the world, him and his brother. I worked with both of them after that movie. And then I did Balboa. When Rocky fought his last fight, I was in the corner of Antonio Tarver, which was Mason the Lion Dixon. And I did Here Comes the Boom with Kevin James, Salma Hayek, Henry Winkler. I had Boss Rutan, had all these guys, had Bruce Buffer, Herb Dean, had all kinds of guys. It was a fun movie. Creed 1 and Creed 2. And then I did an independent one with a guy named Edward James Olmos. I don't know if you guys are familiar.
He looks just like you.
Oh,
that's the guy that kind of looks like you, doesn't he?
I get stopped all the time.
He was in the movie Selena, right? He was the dad. Is that correct?
Yeah, exactly.
Dude, I thought you were the same person. Seriously, it looks so much alike. It's incredible.
So what happened there is Edward James Olmos is Mexican like me, and he's a great actor. He came out Miami Vice and Selena and you know, all these other movies. So I knew he was going to be at the fights because Anderson Silva was fighting Chris Weidman the first time, and I always wanted to meet him, right? So I'm in the back wrapping hands, and one of the UFC staff says, "Hey, man, Edward James Olmos wants to meet you." And man, that's like saying God wants to meet you. And man, I'm excited. And So I finished wrapping hands. I walked down the hallway. I turned the hallway, and I'm looking at him like I'm looking at you, and we start laughing, man. It's the same stuff. So we had a good talk. We, he says people call him Stitch. And I tell him people call me Edward James Olmos all the time. And so we did an independent film with him, but I don't consider that one. But it was funny because when I was doing Creed, the first Creed, we're on break, and Sylvester Stallone and me and we're all just shooting the shit. And Sly's friend is telling the makeup people, oh yeah, Stitch, he looks like Edward James Olmos and this and that, like this, without breaking beat. Stallone's like this, and as soon as he says, oh yeah, he looks like Edward James Olmos, he says, more like Edward James Almost, And I said, that was a cold shot. That's a cold shot. Can't give him a counter punch on, man. But yeah, filming Creed 1 and Creed 2 they were all tremendous. So I've been honored.
Yeah, were you ever? I mean, is that kind of the time you were starstruck the most? Or is any actor that besides Edward James Olmos that you've met that just really you're blown away?
Yeah, you know what? I think Edward James Olmos really had to be the one that got my juices flowing more than anybody. And then especially, when we start talking and, to the point where he's on the phone, he's talking to my mother, and just, it was a good bond. And, but yeah, I don't get starstruck too much, but that one definitely was pretty cool. Mm-hmm. But working with Woody Harrelson was like the best, man. And on the first movie I did, Play It to the Bone, and he was a blast. So I've had some good moments.
Mm-hmm. Did you have some good interactions? Because again, you always hear these stories of people being like, sometimes they're incredibly nice off camera, sometimes they're not so nice. Have you had some cool interactions with the different actors you've come in contact with?
Every one of them, and the thing about it is, we came under a specialty, so we're not actors that are with actors, right? We're playing ourselves in roles that these guys are playing themselves in our field. Mm-hmm. So we got a little bit special attention on that, and a little bit respect. Matt Damon, Ocean's 11, comes up and says, "Hi, I'm Matt Damon." I said, "I know." but yeah, like Sylvester Stallone, just to be with him one-on-one. Well, Michael B. Jordan, I spent every day wrapping his hands. Days we shot for 6 weeks. I'd go to his dressing room, and it'd just be him and I and his friend, and I'd be wrapping his hands every day, shooting the shit with him and all that. And but in the first Creed movie, my name on the script was Marcel. And I'm thinking, oh, Marcel, I don't know anybody named Marcel. I'm going to see how I could change that. But when it was time for Rocky to introduce the team to Adonis, he goes and says, oh, this is Stitch. He's the best cut man in Philadelphia. Man, deep inside, bro, I'm thinking, yes. Next day I said, look, I want to thank you, man, for using my name. He said, hey, it has to be authentic. So, a lot of, and, Sylvester Stallone was very, very astute in the game of boxing and definitely filming. And at that time, Ronda Rousey was going to be fighting Holly Holm, I think, when we did that movie. And he was starting to pick up on MMA, but a lot of great moments with a lot of these guys. And they appreciated what I brought to the table, because they're coming into my game, even though I'm in their game, but they wanted to make it as authentic as possible.
Yeah. And then you said you worked with the Klitschko brothers afterwards, after the movie. What are, because you've worked literally, at the highest level of MMA, some of the highest level fighters in boxing. Are there certain, it may be very similar, but there might be differences. Are there differences in the way that the things that kind of pop up that you have to treat and deal with versus MMA compared to boxing?
Nah, all the same. Okay. To me, a cut's a cut, and a rap is a rap. But one of the things good question, Chewy. One of the things that, let's say I'm working with you for the first time, right? So if what I like to do is the night before is to get together with you and do a dress rehearsal and wrapping your hands, make sure, because there's different techniques I could use for different people. So I'll give you the one that I do 98% of the time, and then we can make an adjustment off that. So I'll go in there and I'll meet with you and I'll wrap your hands. And as I'm doing that, I'm asking you questions. I'm looking, do you cut? Do you get nosebleeds? How's your swelling? Are you taking this? So I get to have a background on you, but in the same token, I want you to have a background on me. And I'm letting you know, because psychology is extremely important. Mm-hmm. And I want you to know that I'm going to take care of it. Like I tell these guys, is I'm going to take care of you like you're my son. You know, so I kind of put that in you to at least take that nervousness out of you. And, you know, so, but there's a lot of true meaning to that, because I take care of him. You know, Lyoto Machida, when he fought Rashad Evans, when he took his title from him, I always work with Lyoto, you know, and even the days in Japan. But, you know, you remember his father, he was a very proud Japanese man with a gi and all that. And so I go to the dressing room after the fights, and his father's sitting there very, very shogun, very proud. And Lyoto standing there, and I'm congratulating Lyoto. And in front of his father, he says, Stitch, in the ring, you are my father. You know, and, you know, moments like that, man, those are, you know, Vladimir Klitschko in his last fight with Anthony Joshua. Same thing. I told him at the weigh-ins, I said, look, put my hand on his shoulder. I said, look, man, don't worry about nothing tomorrow. I'm going to take care of you like you're my son. And right before, there's 90,000 people at Wembley Stadium, number one, millions of people all over the world. And right before I put the final Vaseline on Vladimir Klitschko, right before Michael Buffer does the announcements, he's this far away from me, and I'm putting the Vaseline on him, and he says, you could call me son. Man, that gave me chills. But I knew, and you tell me, Chewy, that the night before, you guys can't sleep because you got your nerves are going through it. And if you could take that away from you, if I could take that away from you, then I've done my job. And I think I did that with Vladimir. And he says it was probably the greatest fight he ever fought in his life, even though he lost. But people were in the audience, 90,000 people were, please go, please go, please go. So it was a respect factor. And he called me a week later and says, Daddy. So you know what it's like. You know?
Yeah, because you know there really is something about when you're in the ring, and then like, you know, the round's over, and you're the person's coming in there to work on you, and like you said, I think especially if you're doing like a kind of checking in with them the night before and kind of getting to know them, it gives them a sense of like, this dude's in there with me, that, you know, they're there for me. And so it takes one less thing, because like you said, if the fight day's coming up, you have all these things going through your mind. And it's nice to be able to take that one thing off, like who's going to be checking my cut if something goes wrong, who's going to be wrapping my hands, all this stuff. It's like I don't have to worry about that. It's one less thing to take off the table, and especially if you can make that bond psychologically, to know that someone else is in your corner that gives a shit. Like that's important, because then it's like, okay, this guy's in there with me. And that's absolutely it's huge.
Yeah, no, I've had, you know, guys, you know, hey man, Stitches in my corner, I'm good to go, you know. And Drago, Pete Sal, I got to throw you a quick story with that one. He fought Matt Brown, and Matt Brown just beat the Holy, right? You remember that fight? And so the referee stops the fight. The doctor comes in, and Drago Pete Sal is arguing with the doctor, and he's arguing with the referee that no, I'm okay. And I come up to him. I said, Drago, look at me. You got knocked out. And he says, Stitch, I believe. You know, so he knows I wasn't there to bullshit him, you know.
Yeah.
But I thought that was a very, very classy moment there. Stitch, I believe. He didn't take the word of the doctors or the referee.
Yeah, I feel like, you know, just from these stories, your connection with the fighters, I think, is maybe something that makes you so successful. Is one of the aspects for sure. I mean, like having some sense of comfort or somebody there that's kind of looking out for you. I think that's just, I mean, in such an unnerving and stressful time when you're getting ready to fight someone, I think that, I mean, that could, I mean, help you win. I mean, it could be one of those things that helps you win, just calming you down.
Oh, of course, man. You know, I've had fighters when I'm wrapping their hands, they cry. You know, the nervousness. You know, I'll let them cry. And I mean, one's a big name. I know we all know him, but I've never thrown his name up. But once he finishes, I give him a hug. I say, man, let me finish wrapping your hands, because you could go out there and knock somebody out. And he ends up winning, you know. And but those moments are important. And I always say, you know, you guys are modern day gladiators. Literally, they're modern day gladiators. But deep inside, everyone is a baby. And I understand that, you know, and I'm there to take care of that baby, you know, and make that man win a fight. I remember Keith Jardine fought Chuck Liddell. If you remember, he beat Chuck Liddell. And I'm walking back to the dressing room after that fight. And if you remember, Keith Jardine's a big, burly man. His father was bigger. He looked like Paul Bunyan, just a big, burly man. And I'm walking past him after Keith Jardine beat Chuck Liddell, and he has tears running down his eyes. Man, I had to stop and just kind of congratulate him. But that's what I mean. You know, we're all, even though this man is as big and brawny as a man as you're going to see, he had tears coming down his eyes, and I understand that.
Yeah, you probably have, because that's one thing, you know, when say like the average fan who watches fighting, they see this like, you know, these fighters in there, they look strong, composed, you know, they're going after things, and like it looks like they're, you know, not invincible, but they're just so tough, right? And a lot of times, you know, you'll get young guys that come into fighting, or I do mostly jiu-jitsu now. I don't fight anymore. And you know, I still compete in jiu-jitsu, and I'll get messages from guys that'll say, man, like, do you get nervous before matches? Did you get nervous when you were fighting MMA? And I'm like, dude, I get so nervous. Everybody gets nervous. You're supposed to be, dude. You're getting ready for battle. But I think you being able to see that sort of, you have a more three-dimensional view of that human being, because you see them, like you said, maybe before the fight, getting emotional, crying, getting nervous. And then like you said, and I'm sure you're probably this way, where I'm sure as a cut man, you got to be kind of a good bullshitter with people to talk, because part of what you're probably doing is wrapping their hands and kind of bringing them down. You know, I remember my buddy, when he was wrapping my hands, it would always be, he would talk with me and then just kind of bullshit with me. And it was like, for a few moments, I'm just kind of relaxed. My hands are getting ready. And then it'd be like, all right, now let's go. But you get to see that three-dimensional view of those fighters, you know, rather than just seeing like these tough guys get out there.
Yeah, you know, and I've been there. You know, I know what pain feels like. I know what it feels like to get your bell rung. I know what it feels like. You know, I know all those feelings, right? And I know what a cut feels like. And so I've been through all those stages, and I know how to address them at that point. But yeah, you're right. You know, just the confidence that I could give these guys, and just the influence I have on them. And not only that, but on the doctors, like Stefan Struve. God, I can't remember Chris's last name. But Stefan Struve fought this guy, Chris, and his lip was shredded. He looked like a shark just bit it. And the doctor comes in to work on him, and Stefan Struve is still active. And, you know, whenever you stop a fight, it's because a fighter is at a disadvantage. Well, even though this looks terrible, he's not at a disadvantage. And the doctor's looking at it and thinking about stopping the fight. And Stefan Struve is kind of arguing with him. And I tell the doctor, I said, look, if you got a good plastic surgeon, he's going to be okay, you know, so let the fight continue. And he did. Stefan Struve went out there and won the fight, you know, so, but they know, you know, who's working the cuts, you know, and that helps a lot also, and doctors and referees determining whether the fight should continue. So that does make a difference.
Yeah. In your years, you know, with working with all these fighters, what kind of attributes have you seen, like that you've worked with a guy, maybe he's up and coming, and you know you have the sense he's going to be a champion, or somebody that's just, what do you see in them that maybe gives you that sense that somebody's going to be a really special talent in boxing or MMA or any combat sports?
Well, technique, of course, you know, that's always first, you know, but then you look at the attitude that they have. You know, how they want to, if they want to still continue to learn, you know, you look at Eagles, and I've told young guys that, you know, they got a little cockier than their position should have been. I said, man, you got to put that down, because that's not going to get you to where you have to go, you know? And, but no, you could see the development. It's nice to see the development of young fighters, and more so in MMA, like Jiu Jitsu. I just tell people, I'm glad I'm old, because this new Jiu Jitsu stuff is way too much for me, bro. You know, I like my joints, and, you know, the only thing I do is ease, man. That's it, you know. And so I like my joints, and I don't want to be tapped out, and it's a different world, man. But you have to understand it.
Do you think equipment has gotten better over the years? Like, you know, Joe Rogan had Trevor Whitman on, who's designing some new gloves and some MMA gloves. Do you think there's anything as far as that you'd like to see that may limit cuts, or any equipment needs that you think could be updated?
Well, you know, I've updated some of my equipment. You know, well, the end swell, what they call the end swell, the iron that you put there.
Yes.
If you notice, the ones before mine they're all flat. All right. So you put them on there, and it's cold compressed, and they're flat, but it never dawned on me. It's Mark Delagrati. I remember we're coming back from fights in Europe somewhere. We're at the airport, and I'm getting a bottle of water like this, and I'm like this, and it's indented there. And I said, man, that makes so much sense, because all the majority of the swelling comes here and here. So the next day I bought some clay, and I molded, I call it the KO swell now, and went into production. So one side is curved for here, and the other side is flat for flat surfaces. So that made so much sense. But the equipment, if you remember when the UFC first started, you had to put your gloves into, it had a strap.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of times that was very, very hard. So what happened when Brock Lesnar fought, actually before that, I take that back. I worked with a company in Florida, a guy that called me and we teamed up in making some equipment, but I took that out and I made a Velcro to go around, and the UFC used it later. If you give me a second, hold on, I'm gonna show you something.
Okay.
If you remember, okay, this is Brock Lesnar's glove, bro.
Oh, man.
Oh, wow.
It's a 4X, but let me show you. Let me see. Yeah. See, before you had this, right?
Uh-huh.
So you would have to put your hand in here and all that. So I cut that out and I just made the Velcro where you could just do that, right? So this glove here, in fact, this set of gloves here was when Brock Lesnar fought, I can't remember who, Carwin, Shane Carwin.
Okay.
I wrap his hands, I'm putting the gloves in, and they literally rip like the Hulk. And I mean, I don't know if you can tell right here, but they just kind of ripped.
Yeah.
Like Hulk, right? And Burt Watson says, Stitch, we only got two, because these are 4Xs. Yeah. We only got 2 pair of gloves. What are we going to do? So I did. I put Vaseline on them. They slipped them in. And then after that, we decided to just take that out because it wasn't necessary. So I haven't seen Trevor's gloves, but I'd definitely love to look at them and see how, the equipment, it really hasn't gotten better, though, to be honest with you. When you look at boxing, how it was in the 40s and the 50s, yeah, the materials have gotten better, but it's the same headgear, same mouthpieces, same type of gloves. I've always thought if I was on the headgears is to maybe put a foam in the back so that when your neck snaps, it doesn't go all the way back. Kind of like you see these football players, something very simple, but yeah, it's for the fight gloves. I don't think I've seen any changes.
Yeah. I always think we're talking about like equipment, and I always think about the Mike Tyson Buster Douglas fight where he had like the rubber glove with water in it. Do you remember that? That
was horrible.
What was the reason for? They just weren't prepared? Is that kind of what?
Yeah, everybody. Yeah, they weren't prepared. They didn't have what they call a cutman on board, and Mike was always such a dominant factor that they really never used him. Of course, until they fought Buster Douglas, but they put that ice and couldn't believe it, in a rubber bag, and I was never so embarrassed for a team as I was for that team. Man. It was horrible because once the situation came where Mike was getting beat and Mike was getting swollen, Mike got dropped. These guys didn't know what to do, So, cutman, we're like insurance policies. You drive a Ferrari, you better get more than just collision.
Yeah, I mean, you're kind of prepared for the worst case scenario. It's almost like Murphy's Law. If something bad can happen, it probably will, or it can. It's just and so with him, you never expect. Like you said, I think he was still undefeated at that time. It was I think he was, and he was knocking everybody out, and then
just and then Mike wasn't training. He just took it lightly. He gets to Tokyo early and he's out there in the clubs and it's all because when Mike used to train in Las Vegas, we used to train at the same gym. Good guy. I mean, I've known Mike since he's been here, but he always brought an entourage. It was like a damn safari. He had 4, 5, 6 cars, and they were all following to the gym. And one guy would take his luggage and other guy would take his clothes out and a guy would, tie his shoelaces and all this bullshit, and guy, they'd leave his car running, and because we live in Las Vegas, they'd leave it running while Mike was training because it was hot outside. You could do that 15 minutes before and just keep it as cold, right?
Yeah.
But those were the kind of guys that Mike had with him all the time, and those are the kind of guys when Mike got hurt, they didn't know what to do, But you said it best, Eugene, and there's a practice I always follow is I always prepare for the worst case scenario.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what you always hear, like in the fighting, right? Prepare for the worst and, the best happens. Because you don't want to get caught with your pants down. Man, I was curious about this because, you went through this rise in your career, and I was curious, was there ever a point, because I've heard different things from different people depending on the situation. Sometimes it just creeps up on them, and then after the fact, like after they're, and I don't mean this as like, you know, because you seem like a super humble person, but obviously you're kind of like one of the guys in your niche, right? You're one of the dudes. Like when someone says cutman, you're one of the first people on people's minds. I don't know if that maybe one day you were just kind of doing something, then all of a sudden it was kind of like, oh, I'm the dude. Like I'm the cutman guy, right? Or was it something where like you got pulled in and like you're like, because you were talking about 90,000 people watching, like, I mean, 90,000, the energy that comes from a crowd that large is just, it's unimaginable, you know? I mean, because gosh, I've been in crowds much smaller, you know, but packed arenas, and there's an electricity that comes from that kind of environment. Was there ever a fight where you were like nervous because it was the crowd was so big, like for one of your first ones or whatever, or was it one thing where after it was over you're like, oh, I'm kind of one of the guys in this niche?
Yeah, well, you know, you're talking about the 90,000 people. That crowd was so loud. Number one, if there's 90,000 people anywhere, that's a lot. But 90,000 Brits is like 150,000 somebody else. But it was so loud that it just buzzed. That was a trip. But yeah, you know, of course, it's always been the adrenaline. One of my main, I guess, attributes is my composure. I always keep my composure, and being that, you know, I was training fighters before, and so I've been in those situations, because in kickboxing, I went all over the world, you know, doing, at that time, the kickboxing was big events, you know, and so I was already accustomed to that. And when it comes to, you know, working with big fighters, but there's been times where I'm walking behind the fighters and it's a big name now, thinking, shit, what am I doing here? You know? So those moments, of course, have hit me, because I'm still that little farm worker that grew up as a farm worker, that kid that grew up as a farm worker, but I'm here with the best fighters in the world, you know? And so, yeah, those moments have been, still are special moments.
Yeah.
Even with Tyson Fury. I worked with Tyson Fury on his last fight, right? That was a big event, because he had cut the fight before, and now he's fighting Deontay Wilder. So they brought me in specifically because of that cut. And then that week of the fight, before the fight, and that week of the fight, I probably did a total of 50, 60 interviews. And everybody's asking about the cuts, but the excitement level of that was tremendous. And I'm in the ring because Tyson Fury had a crown in the dressing room. He had his crown on, and he had like a king's robe. And that's all I saw, because we went into the fights. So they had the corner guys get up in the ring, because Tyson Fury was going to make an appearance by himself. Well, they put him on a damn chairs on things like this. I didn't know that was happening. And the fans went crazy. And I went crazy, because I'm thinking, oh, shit, here I am right in the middle. But those are the moments that, you know, that you live for. And they just, but what a great, great energy.
No, I didn't know that fight. I didn't know what was going to happen. It seemed like, you know, Wilder could knock him out again. It seemed like if Fury had more time, and it was just amazing to see how that fight played out. And it would be interesting to see a trilogy fight. Would you make a prediction if they did have a third fight? Is there anything you expect to see?
Yeah, you know, normally I don't make predictions, because, like, say,
you might work with fighters.
Yeah, well, that too, because, you know, I worked with Vladimir Klitschko when he fought Tyson Fury. And beat Vladimir Klitschko, right? Yeah. But no, I don't do it, because all it takes is one shot. You know, it changes the whole course of the game. But in this one, I would give you the prediction is a matter of fact, on this fight, because I came in 2 weeks before the fights. I came into Tyson Fury's camp. And so I got to see him when he was starting to peak during the sparring. And during the sparring, he kind of looked tremendous. And I always base statistics on numbers, right? So the only chance of Deontay Wilder winning that fight would have been by knockout. Tyson Fury had two ways of winning that fight, by knockout or by going the distance. And if he went the distance, it's guaranteed, just on what I saw, his awkward style and his aggressiveness, he would have won the fight. So everything that I saw him do during the fight, he did in the ring, or he did in the gym. So I knew he was around the fourth, fifth round. I told him, I said, man, they're going to throw the towel in pretty soon. You know, I just saw Deontay Wilder didn't have a plan B going into such a big fight.
You know, working with the UFC, you've kind of talked about this before, that you guys parted ways. Did you feel, you know, from the sounds of it, I've read some interviews on it, there was a money thing, obviously, but did you feel like you had like a stance that you had to take because you're kind of one of the faces of cutmen and just to make sure you guys are compensated properly and taken care of and for what you're worth?
Yeah, that for sure. But yeah, for sure but also because I grew up as a farm worker, right? So even growing up as a farm worker, my parents were in the era of Cesar Chavez, which he fought for fair, equitable work for the farm workers, right? So they were into that type of thing. So when John Nash from Bloody Elbow called me, he called me and asked if I'd be interested in doing an interview on how the Reebok deal affected the cutmen. So I thought about it, and I said, you know what? I know if I do an interview, I'm going to put myself in a hot spot. But being that, going back to being a farm worker, if I didn't do it, my parents would be ashamed of me. They were both deceased, but nonetheless, I got to have pride and follow in their footsteps, but also be politically correct. So I did the interview, and I thought I was politically correct, but it just went viral, and I'm getting calls from all over the world and people supporting me and this and that. And then I got a call from the UFC and they're friends of mine that called me because we were all friends, right? And Mark says, because of the interview you did about Reebok, the UFC is not going to use you no more. And at that time, I'm getting still tons of mail, emails, calls. I mean, I'm doing interviews all over the world. And the first text that I read is I respond back to the guy, I said, I want you to be the first to know that UFC let me go for speaking out about the Reebok deal. Got to look for a new job. And that shit went viral. And but it made me, it made me because they set up the program for fighters and cutmen to get sponsors, to have sponsors available, right? And a lot of these guys were making a lot more money through their personal sponsors than they were on what the UFC was paying them for being the Reebok deal. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so there was a lot of bitching and moaning. Plus, a lot of them didn't like the uniforms, the team looked like a team, and everything that went with it. And so they called the cutmen together, and they tell us, because well, you guys can't have no more sponsors, and we can't give you no increase in pay. I tried to negotiate, because when they would hire me to sponsor me, to say Tap Out, One More Round, Bad Boy, all these companies, Zions, when they would call me to sponsor me, I would also negotiate for Eugene and for Chewy, because they were part of the Cutman team, and let's get the billboard effect. You wouldn't get what I would get, but you would get enough, from 2 or 3 companies to, to be happy. And but they took all that away, and I tried to negotiate for at least a raise, and that didn't happen. And so under those circumstances, I couldn't continue doing what I did as a cutman for the UFC. So when the interview came out, I said, maybe I got to concentrate a little bit more on boxing, because boxing pays a lot more. If I work with Vladimir Klitschko, it's like 6 months worth of work doing UFC events, right? So on the article, I said, maybe I got to concentrate a little bit more on boxing. And yeah, that shit went crazy, man, all over. I got job offers all over the world, Pride and Bellator, PFL. I mean, fights in Europe and everything. And then the dust is starting to settle. And I mean, listen, I did like 57 interviews during that whole process. I had camera crews coming to my house. It was insane. I had Robin Offner from Bad Boy, another guy. They did speeches. Robin Offner called me. I'm on my way to MMA Junkie at the Mandalay Bay to do a radio show. And he was my sponsor, and I'm in the back seat of my car, and my son is driving, and my wife's in the passenger seat because I'm reading him all my messages. It's just the energy level is so high. Robin Offner calls, and it says, Stitch, here's what we want to do. We want to make a T-shirt for you, and all the proceeds go to you. Man, I had so much energy in me, I just started crying. It just that love and support that I got from everybody. And another guy he has Motivational Mondays, and today's topic is about speaking up for what's right. And my friend Stitch Duran and this and that. And I'm here, right, where I'm talking to you guys, and I start crying. And my wife comes in, and she thinks, what's wrong? And she listens to that same audio, and she starts crying. So that was the kind of love I was getting. And then the dust starts settling. And like 2 weeks later, UFC has their first show on Fox. And Karen Bryant is acting Dana White. Well, what about Stitch? Is Stitch ever coming back? Nah. Stitch should have called me and this and that. And then he screws up by saying, Stitch and I were never friends. And that blew up my face and made me the face of the rebellion. So everything worked out for a reason. I have sponsors back now. I'm back with One More Round. Used to be one of my sponsors. And when I did a show with some YouTubers, he saw me on TV, and turns out we're relaunching One More Round. So we came out with it with the Tyson Fury fight. If you guys look back, you see my cornerman jacket. It was designed by One More Round. They'll say One More Round on the back and all that. And then I have my sponsors. So I'm back in business, brothers.
That's awesome, dude. Yeah.
Were you sponsored by like a watch company at some point? Because I remember one of my buddies fought on one of the undercards in the UFC. I think it was out in the Bay Area. And I remember I was like, every time I'd see you had this giant, beautiful watch. I was like, and I was thinking, it must be perfect, because if you're working on someone, they're going to see that beautiful watch there.
Yeah, there was two companies. Curtis and Company, that's the one with the big watches. They call them, if you go to Curtis and Company watches, they call them the watches to the stars, because every one of these stars, you go on his website, and every one of these guys have those big watches, right?
Mm-hmm.
They got 50 millimeters. Rockwell was another company that would send me watches. But it got to the point where people would ask, what kind of watch are you wearing on this fight? Oh, yeah, well, this one's a Rockwell, so-and-so, and this is a Curtis and Company timepiece, So when I did this fight with KSI and Jake Paul, Logan Paul, I worked with them. I didn't know the YouTubers, 20 million followers each. Curtis and Company, Steve Curtis, the owner of Curtis and Company, we were staying at this hotel in Beverly Hills, bro. I mean, I've worked many world title fights, but I've never been in a hotel like this. We flew from Vegas to LA in a private jet. So these guys were making bank, and they were treating us like that. Steve Curtis, from the owner of Curtis and Company, came to the hotel, and he brought me 2 watches. And then, so I used one of them during the fight. And then when I got home, there was 2 more watches, but they're real high-end watches.
Wow.
So, good point, man. But yeah, people always ask, what watch are you wearing?
What was that like? I remember seeing that, and it's amazing how much publicity was, garnered from guys who really, they were training, but they're not like professional boxers, but then they're in there fighting. And I mean, like you said, they were making bank, with those followers that they have. What was that experience like to go from, like you're watching like you're there with Klitschko or, the Tyson Fury, then you're here with these YouTubers that are out there boxing and garnering like, just hundreds and thousands of people like watching it and stuff like that.
It was insane to me, when I worked with KSI. So he came, KSI's from London, for those that don't know. And I guess he's a rapper and he's a YouTuber, and he just came out with a new album. But they came to Vegas to train, and they brought me in to be his cutman. And I knew this much about him. So when he got into the gym and I started wrapping his hands, I said, look, man, I know you're this and I know you're that, but here you're a fighter. So we're going to treat you like you're a fighter. And everything that we trained him like he was a world champion from A to Z. So he got some good training, but I didn't realize how big that this social media stuff was.
Yeah.
Well, until, we did the flying and all that. But once you get into the arena, you get in the dressing room, you put your stuff away, and first thing we do is go up to the ring, right? Check out the canvas and check out the ring. And so the fights were already going on because we're the main event. So I walk out with KSI and his coach, Liddell Riley, which is another YouTuber, and everybody recognizes him and nobody recognizes me. What's wrong with his picture? Usually, hey, Stitch, different clientele, man. So, it was fun working them. Then I did the second one with Gibb that fought Jake Paul.
Okay.
So we'll see what happens.
Yeah. Is there, I know this is probably a difficult question to answer, but is there one fight, one event that maybe just sticks out to you that was just the most unique or most special?
Yeah, there's one that always pops up to the mind and, shows you the heart and soul of a fighter, right? Wanderlei Silva is fighting Chuck Liddell. And I've known Wanderlei through the Pride days, right? In fact, him and Shogun and Verdum and all these guys gave me the nickname Santana when we were in Japan. So, so Wanderlei was a friend, but I'm working, a week before I see him at the gym and, once again, hey, man, listen, I want to give you good karma. It's my birthday that day. I want to give you good karma and all that. And I'm working with Chuck Liddell during the fight. Leon Tabs is working with Wanderlei Silva. And these guys are in a fight, bro, that you could hear those punches. And I'm thinking, oh, man, they're both hitting each other hard. Tough. Chuck gets a cut. I work on him. Leon's working on Vanderlei Silva at the end of the fight. I clean him up. I go check on Vanderlei, and he's swollen, and Leon's working on the swelling and all that. And as a friend, I said, Vanderlei, how you feeling, man? He said, no, I'm okay, Stitch. I'm okay, Stitch. It's Stitch. Happy birthday. I said, man, look at this guy. Just in the most brutal fight ever of his career, and he remembered my birthday, And so that's a special moment.
Mm. Those Pride days were incredible. Like as an MMA fan, it was just like the Wild West. I mean, it was just crazy. It seems like, they have all these crazy fights and matchups, and then like brawls. You'll see like they had a brawl in the back. It was just wild. It seems like MMA has come so far, even from that time. It's just, even though some of those guys still fighting to this day.
It was great. I started going to Japan with Josh Barnett. When Josh left the UFC, I think he signed up first with New Japan Pro Wrestling and then Pride or whatever. Anyway, he asked me how much I'd charge to work with him. So started going with him, and the guys there, all the other guys would want me to wrap their hands because they're, and Josh says, nah, you know what? I pay to bring this guy in. If you want him to wrap your hands, it's going to cost you $500, right? So Josh was agent, man, I'd make $2-3 grand a night, man. All the top guys, Fujita and all the top guys, I wrapped their hands, and they had no questions paying me. And that's why, like Fedor, when I wrapped his hands, I didn't even ask him about money, bro, because it was not about money. It was just about me wrapping Fedor Emelianenko's hands. To me, it was a privilege.
Yeah, because I guess you're around watching that stuff, so I imagine you become kind of a fan of everything, right?
Yeah, of course you have to be a fan. Yeah.
And then, one of the things I find interesting is like when I talk to people, you get like you always kind of get a vibe from people, and you keep kind of going back to the fact that obviously you're this dude, and people are saying Stitch, we know Stitch, and you're in there helping people out, and you're in movies and all this stuff. How do you like stay humble? Is it remembering the fact that you were a farm worker when you were a kid? Yeah. Like kind of going back to what you said, right? Like no matter who the warrior is in the ring, in the end of the day, they're still a young kid. They're still a baby. They're still originally that person.
Yeah. It's I never forget where I come from. That to me, that's my motivation. and like I say, the first time I was at the Tokyo Dome in Japan, it's 80,000 people or something. I walk in and I'm in the middle of the ring, and I'm looking up and I'm thinking, shit, man, little kid from Panada, here I am, and in the middle of all this. So yeah, that always, I always give back. I never forget where I come from, and I'm always that kid. As a matter of fact, on the back of my outfits, on my collar, I have my little town Planada. And so I always give them props because, I grew up in a migrant camp, and then I moved to a little town of 1,500 people, which were all farm workers. But like back home, I'm like the big cheese. Everybody knows me. And when I did the Creed movie, the director gave me 100 tickets, gave me some posters, and I put a boxing program together at the school, the grammar school, to keep the kids off the streets and all that with the county sheriff and the school district. But I gave 40 tickets to the kids, and the school furnished them with a bus, and the other 60 I grew up, give them to kids I grew up with from here on up. So we went to go see Creed by ourselves in our own theater with like 100 people, and
nice.
Furnished the drinks and the popcorn and all that. So that's what keeps me where I'm at right there. And I never forget where I come from, and I'm always very appreciative of where I'm at. And, very, very special.
That's cool, man. And then, just another question kind of along the same lines, because, I have a large YouTube following that listens to these podcasts and stuff as well. And there's a lot of young guys that are either training or they're getting ready to train, or, they might have dreams of opening up their own gym or whatever. Obviously you have a very unconventional lifestyle. You've taken the skill, you've developed it, you've opened up gyms, and you've kind of gone down this like crazy twisty turny thing to end up where you are. What would be some advice? And you may or may not have anything. I imagine you have some. You seem to have a little depth of knowledge here to dig from, but in wisdom. But what would you say to someone that maybe has like, these dreams, these aspirations, these goals, just like you did when you were a cut man, you're coming up and you're trying to learn? What would you say to someone as a small tidbit of advice if they're chasing something that maybe isn't the normal path, the normal road to follow? What would you say to encourage them along their way?
Well, I always tell them, follow your dreams because they do come true. They might not be for everybody, but here's the most important part right there, Chewy and Eugene, and you guys have been in. I know when you open your podcast, now you tell me you're a YouTuber. That's why you're so damn good on the radio. So good, man, for just being a jiu-jitsu guy. But you know what? And we all been through that. I always tell them, you know what? There's that one line that you're going to be scared to cross. And if you don't cross it, you'll never get to the other side. Am I right or wrong?
Rubicon. Yeah.
I mean, if you guys been scared, like, damn, should I not? And also I tell them that if you do it for the money, you do it for the wrong reasons, because you got to do it with pure passion, because not everybody makes money in what they do, in what they love. So those are the pieces of advice I give anybody and everybody.
Yeah, man, that's that line there, crossing the quote, the Rubicon, right? That line, that point of no return. Like that's one of those moments we all go through. If you follow that, like I said, the unconventional path where you got that pit in your stomach, you're nervous, and you just kind of take the leap.
Yeah. I remember when I when I made the move to Las Vegas, I had a nice 8-to-5 job, company car. I worked RJ Runs Tobacco Company. I was with them for 23 years. I put in for a job transfer. So when I got the job transfer, they gave me a week to come to Vegas, and I negotiated 2 weeks. And in 2 weeks, I sold my house. I gave my school to a student. I put my family in a U-Haul, and I moved to Vegas. But I took a $25,000 a year cut and pay, which is mega big, and that's why you have family to support you. But there was a time where my brother was living here, and he comes to my house, and my wife is crying, and he thought we got into a fight and what have you not, but we couldn't pay our rent. And at that time, my brother gave me money to pay my rent and still have a little extra. And from there, I never turned back. But, we've all gone through those valleys where, you got to pick yourself up and continue doing it, and so I've been through those many, many times, and just being a farm worker, I'd gone through so many economical moments, that didn't give me the privilege of doing what a lot of other people did. And so, we've always told ourselves, I've always told myself mentally that if I don't make it, at least I know I could pick tomatoes. I know I could pick peaches. I know I could pick cotton, so that skill level I know I have.
Yeah, that just like right there kind of goes back to, a lot of times people see people when they're at kind of their peak. They see a fighter who's at the moment where, he's fighting, he's winning, and they don't think about the valleys that he had to go through to get there. Right. And then, if someone sees you, with your big, giant, beautiful watch and, rapping, you're out hanging out with all the fighters as like Tyson Fury's getting carried on a litter with a throne, it's one of those things where it's a 3-dimensional view because, humans kind of go through a lot of the same experiences, especially if you're chasing, that thing that you're after.
Yeah. And, not everything is roses.
Mm-hmm.
You might only get to where you want to get 40% of the way, but 40% is a lot better than 30, and just keep plugging away. And one of the guys just sent me a message, Robert from Brazil. I guess he might be listening to your station. He's talking about one more round. He wants to handle it in Brazil.
Nice.
That's awesome.
You do have some followers, and but yeah, no, that's what keeps me humble, man, and just to have the experiences. I got to show you one thing. Give me a second. Hold on.
Yeah, for sure.
You're talking about special moments, man. Look, talking about Fedor Emelianenko.
Oh wow.
He gave me my own tournament, my own team.
That's awesome.
That's awesome.
Look, I mean, it's just team stitch. Look at that. So I had to show you that. So I that was the last time I worked with him when I was with Bellator. I walk into the hotel and he's in the lobby with all his team and all that. And he comes up to me and gives me a hug and says, I got you some sweats. I said, wow. So he sends a guy up and brought back some sweats and had my name on them. And, I don't wear them, of course, but they're special moments. They're special because when he had these outfits made, he was probably still in Russia. Mm-hmm. And he thought about me when he was there. And that's what makes those moments special. I've gotten them from Lyoto Machida, from Tito Ortiz, and, those are all special moments.
Yeah, and I'm sure that's probably because of the fact that, when it comes down to it, the brass tacks, you actually care when you're in with those dudes. Mm-hmm. So that's going to come across as genuine, and they're going to realize that. So, that's powerful.
Yeah, no, it is powerful. Like even Fedor's brother, Alexander, Are you familiar with it, Alexander?
Oh,
Yes.
yeah. Mm-hmm.
Gangster. All the way.
Yeah, all
But he
tatted up.
showed me, but he showed me so much respect, bro. I was scared of him, but I didn't show it.
Yeah.
Yeah, he has like the Grim Reaper. I think a Grim Reaper on his back, giant tattoo.
Yeah, it's a bad boy.
Yeah. Stitch, man, thank you. You know, we're gonna wrap it up. It's been truly an honor, you know, for you to take the time with us. We've seen you, you know, just being MMA fans and being boxing fans. We've seen you there, being a part of all these events. It's just kind of really a pleasure to speak with you and kind of having you share your story with us. You know, thank you very much for that.
No, of course. No, of course. And you know, let me also add is I'm working the bare knuckle fights also. So put that onto my tutelage of experience, which is great because they all get cut.
I was going to say, they're all going to get cut in a bare knuckle.
Yeah.
3% cut ratio, you know. But I just got a call from Top Rank. So they're going to be starting to do 2 shows a week, starting next week on Tuesdays and Thursdays for ESPN. And being that it's going to be no audience, like the UFC.
Yeah.
But they're only going to allow a coach or a fighter and 2 trainers. And if they don't have cutman, they brought me in as a cutman. So I got work 13 shows June and July, man. So I've been blessed.
If people want to get a hold of you, I know you have some of your equipment and some of your supplies. Where can they get those from you?
Yeah, well, you know what? All the equipment is at Cutman for Hire Supplies. I teamed up with him. He has all the Cutman and Quarterman supplies that you need, the best in the business. But I was carrying my own Stitch team premium tape and my KO swell and the wrist wrap where you put the swabs. And I just couldn't do it because I was on the road so much. But through a dream, I woke up the next day and I called Juan. I said, would you be interested in carrying my products? So he carries my products. And I also, real quick before we leave, I also teamed up. One of my sponsors and partners now became a partner with them is CBD Science. They created a cut cream that is used for the healing process once you get cut. And we've been using this on bare knuckle fighters. So once they're in the dressing room, they get sewn up. We'll take a picture of them. We'll give them the cream. They apply it every day, and the healing process gets faster. So it has the CBD, has the stem cell, which helps generate the tissue, has collagen for the moisturizing, and vitamin E. So when they called me, I said, well, what proof source do you have? I said, well, that's why we called you. I said, well, bingo. You know, let's go do it with the bare knuckle fighters. So Dave Feldman and the fighters have been real receptive towards it. And they're one of my sponsors. They partnered up with me now. So I'm one of their partners in CBD Science.
Thank you for your time. And
yeah, good job, you guys. Nice talking to you guys and nice meeting you guys. And next time I'm in Louisville, we'll hook up.
That'd be great. I'd love to. Absolutely.
All right, my man. God bless.
You too. Take care.
Later, Stitch. All right, guys. So I hope you enjoyed that episode of the podcast with Stitch. Again, that was a fun one. I've kind of like come to this realization over and over again where the more people that I meet and that have, accomplished something, whatever, the more and more you talk to them, it's like we always kind of go back to who we were, right? So for instance, like with him, he was a farm worker, farmhand, and then, picking, like you said, fruit, cotton, whatever they wanted him to pick, right? And then when he's in those situations, he's trying to make sure that he takes care of the people around him too, just like he probably was doing when he was younger, right? And I think about that even with me right now, where I'm trying to sort of put the pieces together to create like a program for teenagers to come into the gym. All I'm doing really is going back to who I was when I was younger and being like, this helped me. I want to make sure I take care of these people just like I was taken care of by another person. Yeah. And I feel like that cycle, that's circling back around. Like when you get somewhere, and again, it's the hero's journey, man. You go around and then you look back and you say, hey, you guys, you're where I was. Let me help you out, pull you along, And I think that's just such a beautiful way to live. Instead of, you in that podcast, you had 2 ways to contrast life. You can be the guy, the cut man who was like, F off. I'm not teaching you anything, right? And be closed off, or you can say, you know what? Let me help you out. And when you do that, you can create a legacy because you create a ripple. You make a drop. If you think of like a water droplet, right? If you drop a little thing of water, boop, it hits, and it hits just in the center, sure, right? But then all of a sudden these waves come out. And it's like that because, Stitch doesn't know in 20 years, 10 years, whatever it might be, how many of these guys he's trained to be cutmen might have saved a fighter's ability to fight for one more round and get the win, who may have changed their life, right? Because what if the fighter, just like Stefan Struve, what if they fix the cut up, he gets to fight one more round, and boom, he wins the fight, and he got his big UFC deal, and his life's literally changed.
Yeah.
Right? You don't know what you do, and your actions have so many consequences, and it's a better way to live, to just impact people in a positive way. You build yourself into a roaring fire, right? And then those sparks of flames are coming off from you, and then you light other fires around other people, and then when they build up their fire, they do the same thing. And if everybody lived in that manner, the world would be a hell of a place to be, wouldn't it? I mean, it's still a hell of a place now, but if you thought if everybody lived with that mindset, friggin' how amazing would it be, man? It's like it would be so much different. And again, not everybody's going to be like that, but I encourage you guys, because again, you guys are listening right now. I imagine you're probably those types of people. Always look back and see who you can help.
Yeah, he never. The one thing I picked up was he never lost sight of who he was, where he came from, and him being, never feeling like he's a better or above anybody else. That came back around. Like when I reached out to him to be on the show, he was like, "Yeah, I'll be on the show, of course." And so he gives back, and I think that's going to make him, he's going to be seen as a legend in this sport and what he does, and one of the greatest of what he does. And also, people are going to remember who he is.
And that's also why when he was training, or when he was doing people's hands and everything else, or when he needed help, right? There was no problem. Like people are lining up to help him.
Yeah.
Because if you impact people like that, they come back around. And so again, it was a beautiful podcast. I had a lot of fun talking to that dude. Cool dude. So anyway, guys, hope you guys enjoyed the podcast. As always, just a big thanks again to our sponsors, Charlotte's Web CBD. If you want to check out their products, go to charlottesweb.com. Use a promo code Chewjitsu and buy yourself some really high quality CBD products to either help you out with your sleep, stress, and anxiety, whatever you're dealing with. I think it's a fantastic product, and again, I'm a big believer in it. I wish I would have been taking it sooner. I was thinking about this, man. Like, I wish I would have been taking it back in like 2013 or whatever, when the first time I heard about it on the Joe Rogan podcast. But I was like, snake oil. It ain't snake oil. That's the reason why it's so darn popular, because there's some powerful benefits to it. You can check out Epic Roll Bjj. Check out some of their gear. If you're in the market for some cool jiu-jitsu gear that's going to maybe have people looking at you when you're walking down the aisles of a grocery store, like it did me, when they're looking at me like, what is a triangle choke? You're kind of like in the jiu-jitsu club. You can check them out at epicrollbjj.com, and again, use promo code Chewjitsu, 15%. And then check out Jugo, the card game. Again, whether you want to just kind of another card game to play, or if you have some kids that are doing jiu-jitsu that you'd like to encourage it and kind of make it fun, I think it would be a really useful thing. You can check out their website at jugoplay, JIUGOPLAY.com, and you can use the promo code Chewjitsu. And like right now, he's got the core deck, which is basically your fundamentals of jiu-jitsu, which again, that could be a cool thing to reinforce. And then later on, he's going to come out with the blue belts and the other expansion packs, where I guess the content of the deck is going to change into stuff a little bit more complicated, which would be interesting to see. Like, what are you going to get for blue, purple, brown, black? Like, how complicated it's going to get,
Half guard? Probably.
Well, it's got half guard in there.
Half guard.
Yeah,
okay.
half guard's in there. It's got all the basic guards. That's what I'm saying. Like, you're gonna get into something like where does worm guard fall in that? Like where does the berimbolo, all that kind of stuff. So like, it would be interesting to see where all this stuff comes in, or if he changes the structure of it. But either way, it's almost like, now I'm starting to think, it almost reminds me of like, you play like a Magic or something where they have the expansion packs and stuff.
Yeah.
But check it out, guys, and then and then Eugene's hip course. So again, we'll talk more about it. But again, if you want to get the details, check out his website, grapplingrx.com/hips, HIPS. And again, he's choosing hips because if you're